Previously on No Market Media.
Not pleased with the way season 1 ended. I was like, wow, that's weird and stupid. But there's enough here for me to be like, yeah, I definitely want to see season 2.
Me, I'm a little bit on the other side. I did enjoy this. I think it was well put together. There's good elements. I just don't think there was quite enough there for me to really hook me in to be like, all right, I gotta recommend this to other people, or hey, I gotta go watch season 2. We'll see if that changes as time goes on.
Hi, this is Randall here with No Market Media.
And I'm Matt. Today, Randall and I are returning to a show by executive producer Ridley Scott. We're checking out season 2 of Raised by Wolves. It has an extensive cast that includes Amanda Collin, Abu Bakar Salim, Travis Fimmel, and Niamh Algar. It's created by Aaron Guzikowski, who also wrote the movie Prisoners, which we have a review of, and the show The Red Road.
Season 2 picks up with Mother, Father, and Campion, and of course the Mithraic children, joining the Atheist Collection on Kepler 22b as their arc just showed up at the end of Season 1. The planet is proving to be more hostile than first thought, as it's become clear that there are remnants of another ancient war that is still raging between an unseen adversary and the world's new inhabitants. Raised by Wolves Season 2 has seen near universal acclaim by critics and is also very well liked by most audiences. Well, okay, first impressions. I think first and foremost good science fiction is the point. This is like hard sci-fi, which I'll talk more about my definition of hard sci-fi in the genre section.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy that they did start explaining things. Like at the end of season 1, I'm like, man, they better explain that serpent. And they did. So like that kind of stuff made me happy. But at the same time, they also included more and more mystery and intrigue. They left more question marks than they explained in this season, while expanding on things. So I'm still happy that it's good science fiction, because I'm a science fiction junkie of sorts. But kind of like, where are we going with this?
For me, I think I'm one of the few people who probably saw season 2 and it was like, you know what? This is the season that finally lost me. Not that I couldn't follow what was going on. I could follow what they're going with and what they're trying to do. But for me, I think this season, this show might be just going to too many places for me. And honestly, the final shot that we get at the end of the season was the nail in the coffin for me. That's when I was like, yep, I'm done.
Interesting. We're gonna talk about that. I'm sure.
Okay, so kind of what you were talking a little bit too when referring to like the plot. What I like about season 2 and its plot is we do have a lot of carryover from season 1. At least a lot of the themes. We're still looking at, what does it mean to be human and stuff, especially looking at like religion and stuff. It's like, what role does religion play in people's lives, or how do certain people use religion in order to achieve some of their own personal goals and stuff? So I like that a lot of those themes and stuff with the story kind of get carried over, but we also have, new stuff building as well.
Yeah, now for me the plot is more about the people than the bigger overarching themes that are going on. Honestly, they're there. If you enjoyed that part of season 1, season 2 continues that, like you said. But the story follows this group of people as they're just trying to make their way and being influenced by these outside forces and not really knowing what's going on. Seeing everything unfold is what brings it home for me. The part of the plot that I was less interested in, which I wanted to be more interested in given what happened in season 1, was everything that was going on with Marcus and Sue and Paul. Where I'm like, they were kind of left out, like hung out to dry a little bit. And I'll talk about characters, how they're not particularly, as well fleshed out as they were in the previous season. They're just being manipulated in this season. But all of the stuff that happens with Mother and Father and the other kids, I think is interesting. And especially the new character that's brought on, Grandmother. Like all of that story unfolding and actually starting to tell, what happened on this planet? What happened before we got here? And we learn more about Earth. We learn more about, the battle that raged there and the battle that raged here. I'm okay with all that story element. I latched onto that way more than the themes.
I do think relationships are a big part of this show and stuff too. Some relationships I think are more important, I would say, probably in season 2 than maybe there's season 1. I don't know, maybe there's a little bit more focus, or some of them maybe not get as much attention. But going on another one, kind of like the themes and stuff I was talking about, like humanity and what it means to be human. I think this one goes a step further, especially near the end of the season, where it's basically like, all right, what does it take for survival, and how much humanity are people willing to give up or whatever in the sake of survival, kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of a little interesting thing that they put in there.
There's an interesting like wink and you'll miss it kind of thing, where they have the collective has that big computer that kind of tells everyone, this is your task for the day.
Yep.
Which is the same thing. It's like, well, are you humans who are making your own decisions, or are you just being told what to do by a machine?
Yep.
What is survival? What is it? Just surviving, or is it thriving?
Right.
Basically. But it comes back around with grandmother. You kind of have to watch, because I don't want to spoil anything like in that like tone, basically. But that completely comes back around because those machines were on the same level.
Yep.
Yep. And I think this is something that maybe the ending of the series is confusing. Well, season is confusing. Is now I'm kind of confused. Well, where does the story go? After watching season 2, I'm like, all right, most of the cast is teenagers. They're not old enough to take up the mantle of like the main cast, like the age of, Game of Thrones characters.
Yep.
It took them seasons before they became the main characters, So where does the story go from here? Is it still something I'm interested in knowing? But at the end of this season, I'm like, I just don't know. How does this story end? Do you jump forward in time like 100 years and be like, oh, this is how things, Battlestar Galactica style, like where does the story end? That is what I'm left wondering after watching season 2.
Yeah, I think it might just pick back up and keep going or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. That is a good question. Do we skip forward and see where these kids are?
I mean, I think season 3 will just pick up right from season 2. I'm not saying it's not, but I wonder, like, what is the end game? Is it like, hey, what's going on with this entity? And in Game of Thrones, as I already used it as an example, I'll just grab onto it again. You knew where the story would end. It's either, the Lannisters win or the North wins, basically. Like, there's an obvious like way that the conclusion can go. I have no idea where this goes.
I would say for me, a lot of what hurt me in the season 2, and it's with the story element, I think we set up things and then we get rid of them pretty quickly, and we go on to the next thing and get rid of it quickly, and then the next thing and get rid of it
honestly,
quickly.
It could have used 10 episodes. Like, season 1 was 10 episodes. This is only 8. I'm like, I feel like it was rushed.
Yep.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we mentioned Game of Thrones. One of the things I think worked about Game of Thrones is you get attached to like certain characters that were building like an arc and take a while to build an arc, and then Game of Thrones like, nope,
and
it's
then season
done.
7 and 8 are just like, forget all that. No one cares about that stuff anymore.
Yep.
Good point. So for characters, the real improvement is giving the rest of the cast more to do, which is weird. Like the kids, the teenagers and everything. They have a lot more to do, but they're still objectively not main characters.
Yep.
So mother, father, and Marcus and Sue, and then the new character grandmother. They're more or less the main characters. Campion has more to do. Still not enough to do to be like, oh yeah, he's the main character, basically. But I am happy that they're fleshed out more. That, forgive me, the character's name, the oldest of the group, the oldest like teenager. He's basically an adult at this point. He's an interesting character. He's coming into his own, and as a more grown-up thinking philosopher kind of person. So that was fun. But it's all about mother and father for the most part.
Yep. That was what I was going to say too. It's interesting kind of looking at humanity and stuff, and yet our two main characters, the ones that we put the most in, are in mother and father. And I think it's because they have like the most dynamic, or when you want to say, responses to what's happening. Like we see a lot of conflict with mother. Like the decisions she makes and how she justifies those decisions that she makes. But it's not really straightforward. Like, you actually see her struggle with, emotions, or trying to do calculations, as an android, like, hey, what is the right path and stuff, too. So I think that's good. Father, maybe not as much as season one, but I think we do decent with Father, where Father's really trying to figure out, okay, what is my role, kind of thing. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do I support Mother? How do I still help the kids? And that at the other time, too, some of his personal journey, the show looks at, like, well, his personal journey is getting away of, like, your true function, which is supposed to be,
Yeah,
watching the kids.
his whole programming is make sure the kids survive, make
Mm-hmm.
sure like him and this family unit function and survive. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. But there are things that are happening personally. He's you hesitate to use the word evolve, but he's changing. He's growing as a character, and he's growing as like a person in the series.
Mm-hmm.
So some of his emotions, some of like how he perceives, now this is my way of helping the family, is not the same way that Mother thinks. She looks at it and says, well, that was risky. Why would you do that? That puts the family at risk. And he goes, well, no, this is how I see it, basically. And they're interesting characters.
Yep.
I think they're fine to watch. Marcus and Sue, though, I had already said this. Man, they get the short end of the stick. I'm just like, you like, Marcus is trying to rebuild something.
Yep.
But he doesn't really have like the entity or soul in his head, which is explained reason for why he doesn't anymore.
Yep.
Because of where he goes, basically. Yep. And Sue, man, if both of them get the short end of the stick, Sue gets the short end of the stick. I'm just like, I don't even recognize this character from season one almost.
Yep. Well, one of the things that I guess is kind of a little bit of a problem I had with the show a little bit. I think people are characters that are shown to have strong convictions in the show give up those strong convictions like pretty quickly. Like, granted, there's some pretty big events, I guess, that happen. But it's kind of like, I'm gun-ho this, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not gun-ho that anymore, kind of thing.
Well,
so that's one thing I didn't like how it was treated as much.
So, as anyone, Randall's gonna shove a Star Trek reference in. Okay. So there are things that happen. You're right, with these characters that have really strong convictions, and then like a miracle happens, whatever it is.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, those convictions are out the window because a miracle happened. Now, in Star Trek, The Next Generation in particular, this happens all the time. That whole thing is all about, like, we can try and explain it with science. We can try, like, when something that's too magical, too good to be true happens, we're going to hold true to our convictions of explorers, as scientists, and wanting to bring some completion or understanding to this phenomenon. Raised by Wolves season 2, not that. Yeah, Marcus has his convictions, and then something terrible happens, and then something terrible happens again. I can kind of see him giving up what he does. Because of like 3 or 4 terrible things happen to him.
Yep.
But like I said, Sue gets the short end of the stick.
She does.
Like one thing, and it's like, oh, it's real.
One thing I kind of like about that, though, is it is kind of a like gotcha moment, I think, for the audience too, because it's kind of like if you watch season 1 and stuff that's happening with Sue, you're kind of like, okay, this is like repeating itself, or something that we saw with another character. But then the show's like, nope, it's not going that route.
Other way. The other way.
All right, so this might be a little bit different. I would say, sci-fi is normally what you say. But this show kind of goes past sci-fi for me. I see this more as like a fantasy show that talks about theology. I think we're really kind of looking at religion a bit. Like, of course, that was like themes and stuff that they had before. But this one, I think they're really looking into not just like beliefs, but like belief system impacts kind of thing. But yeah, some of the things that go on in this show to me went past the science fiction realm and into like, dude, we're straight up making people trees and having things eat trees, and yeah, that went past science fiction to me.
So for me, I still think it's sci-fi, and I define it as hard sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like the easygoing, laid-back science fiction of Star Wars and Star Trek. You know, this is hard science fiction, basically. More Farscape. You know, like just straight up science fiction.
Yep.
You know, there's not pretending there's reality. However, I look at it and I say all the theological aspects of it, which are definitely there.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's, you know, the Mithraics aren't exactly, you know, like our current Earth's religions, but like maybe a conglomeration of all of them or something like that. I think it's there, and they explain it as an entity. You know, grandmother, the character, she's like, oh yeah, this, whatever it is, we don't really know, but we know that it's something here on this planet, and I liked that aspect of the show. But I just looked at it as science fiction.
I think it's kind of interesting too. Like, you have some people that's looking at Soul and stuff and taking like the religious approach to it, and yet Sue is one of our characters. It's kind of like, you know, Soul, like a god or whatever. No, it's like some alien entity or something like that. So it's like, you know, there is something, but there's something behind it. So I think, you know, that part I think is good in like science fiction stuff, and I do think we do see some themes that we see in other like science fiction shows too that really hamper onto this. I mean, we might be talking about like human, you know, civilizations or like history repeating itself kind of thing, which I think is something that we often see in like science fiction.
Clearly, this is the prequel series to Battlestar Galactica.
What happens once happens again.
Well, yeah, that is a trope. Oftentimes in science fiction, The Matrix, for example, very good, famous example of that.
Yep.
I think that this one wraps it up. I'm gonna say wraps it up because the story's not done.
not like that. No.
But I think it wraps it in like a blanket of enough science fiction that it's interesting. Not just, hey, we're gonna talk about God or Soul as they call him here. We're gonna say, oh no, there's a thing. We know there's a thing. It has trouble like getting into the tropical zone because of there's an EM field around it, you know, and it's all explained.
Yep. It's
in the season. I'm like, okay, cool, it's explained. They don't know what it is, but it's definitely science fiction. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, so obviously Matt and I have disagreed throughout this one. I like the show. Matt's not so hot on the show. He's gonna love season 3. Maybe that's the season that brings you back.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. That happens sometimes.
All right, but for me, I didn't see this coming. The end of season 2.
Yep.
I thought season 2 was rolling along pretty well. I mean, yeah, some things are rushed, and I could feel that. At first, I thought there were only 6 episodes. In fact, I was like, "Oh, there's only 6 episodes. Wow, this is really gonna." And then there's 8. But the end of season 2 felt like a mid-season break. It feels. I mean, yeah, there's cliffhangers. There's more than one cliffhanger. But it doesn't feel like there's any conclusion to the season. Season 1 was telling a story, and it told its story while leaving. This is what's going to happen. You know, the other arc shows up. The atheist arc shows up. The serpent goes off. That's your cliffhanger. Like, oh, wow, this happened. They revealed, like, the core of this planet is, like, weird and, like, not like Earth or anything like that. All of that stuff. Like, all right, that's cool stuff, but, like, the story that needed to be told for season 1 was told.
Yep.
This didn't feel like season 2 finished the story season 2 was trying to tell. Didn't see that.
Yeah, I actually feel like we have more setup for the next season, I think, in this season than we did in season 1. And, you know, one of the characters specifically, you're talking about, like, grandmother and stuff, we are really establishing what grandmother's going to be in the next season, you know, especially at the end of, like, this season kind of thing. So, yeah, that's something definitely interesting. What I didn't see coming is how many aspects of the show I would actually laugh at, and not in a good way. There, to me, and that's where I was going on with the fantasy, where to me it kind of went from like the science fiction to the fantasy, at least for me. Those are the parts that I laughed and like, oh my goodness, really? This is where we're going with? And the one that I mentioned before, the biggest one is the last shot. Like, that's where I laughed. I'm like, yeah, this. It's gone to a place for me where it's like, yep, like this is where we're going.
Interesting. Because I looked at the last shot and I was like, what the f-?
Yeah.
No, but I didn't laugh at it.
No, but
I looked at it and I was like, what?
I probably thought the same words in my head, just in a different way.
The tone was different. Mm-hmm. I thought of it as like seriously just a question, like what? This is how you're gonna end the season? What?
Yeah, I have different theories too on what that ending could mean. Because granted, people are already going out there. It's like, what does the ending mean, kind of thing. I think there could be, different ways of trying to explain what actually happened.
Spoiler alert. It's not God. It's the devil.
Yeah.
And a spoiler alert. Randall's theory.
So, season 2 of this. I do like that this season has good characters and stuff still. I think they're still the driving force of this series. And it goes to new places and stuff. We're looking at different things, different aspects, and, while expanding on different ideas that we had in the first season. But to me, some things just are too easily removed or whatever. And the show generally just goes in too many places or too many setups or whatever for me to really invest. And I think that's where season 2 kind of lost me.
In general, I like season 2,
but
I do agree that there's things that are too fast. Like Marcus is rebuilding this kind of flock around him, and then it's like done in half an episode. And you're like, all right, well, whatever it happened, but why so fast? But I still enjoy the narrative. I still enjoy the story unfolding. I do want a little bit more explanation of things, which, I mean, they at least explained the serpent, why it flies, where it gets its, kind of powers from. Like, okay, you know what? That makes sense.
Yep.
Completely tracks. It's not hard to understand. It's not hard to follow if you're watching the show. But then they left, like you said, just a ton of loose ends, which I would love to see explored further. So I hope that season 3, honestly, I will give shows usually a good chance to explain themselves. So hopefully season 3 starts with the explaining. I'm not one of those people who's interested in watching 8 to 10 season shows anymore.
Yep.
Where it just takes forever to get to the point.
I will say, though, in kind of like contradiction to that or whatever, what I think could bring me back in season 3 might actually be like a pace change. Maybe if it was a little bit like we dive into some things like maybe a little bit longer, like maybe not go over episodes, but more episodes, something like that. That might bring me back in if they did like a little bit of a pace change.
Yeah, do a 16 episode season or something.
Yeah.
Take the time, slow it down, and tell it out through a season instead of hurry up and doing it in 8 episodes. But don't drag it out to like 7 seasons or something like that. Nowadays, when things were episodic, it was more a thing. Like, hey, 7 seasons of TNG and Voyager and stuff like that. It's like, oh, yeah, whatever. It's mostly episodic. So it doesn't really matter. Friends.
Yep.
Exactly. But then when you got into like storytelling like Breaking Bad, even stretching into 5 seasons for Breaking Bad, you're like, oh, wow, you're reaching.
Yep.
When you have these like stories that need to be told, tell them. And then be done with your story.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree with that.
Stretch it out to 7 seasons. Game of Thrones.
Well, Randall and I, we want to know what you guys think about season 2 of Raised by Wolves. Let us know in the comments below if you've watched it. Also, be sure to check out some of our other reviews. We check out other TV shows. We also look at new movies. We have flashback movie reviews. And we have deeper dive discussions.
And make sure to go check us out over on Facebook. We always post on Facebook the video that's coming out the next day on YouTube, as well as some stuff from our other fandoms. But if you do not have Facebook, do not worry about it too much. Just put us on your calendars. New videos every Monday and Thursday. For now, I'm Randall here with No Market Media. See everyone next time.
And I'm Matt. Have a good day, everyone. Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.